All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Orca Man podcast. This is Orca Man here, Fred. And today I'm here with Taryn Scarff. And Taryn, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi. My name is Taryn. I am a master's student at the University of British Columbia. I'm in the Marine Mammal Research Unit, and I'm currently studying transient killer whales.
Woohoo. The MMRU. I was gonna say, I always love when you see acronyms and they're actually, rather than like being shortened, they actually set out. It's 90% of it is just understanding like what half the stuff is. I remember entering UBC and it was like LFS. I'm like, what the hell is that?
I know so many acronyms around UBC, and it's confusing because there's the Marine Mammal Research Unit, MMRU, but then in Vancouver there's also Marine Mammal Rescue, which is just MMR.
Okay.
So having to discern between MMR and MMRU can be confusing.
Well, because you posted some of their stuff that they've been putting up, because I know that they had like there's a Marine Mammal Rescue like show, or like they have like they're featured on one or something like that.
Yeah, so I volunteer at Marine Mammal Rescue. I did a practicum there during my undergrad. And so last summer during COVID and everything, they recorded a TV show called Wild Pacific Rescue.
That's sick.
So there's only 3 episodes. It was just like a limited series. Hopefully it'll be picked up for more, but yeah, it's really cool. Just kind of followed them around through some disentanglements with like sea lions, day-to-day stuff that happens at the rescue center. So it's mainly harbor seals that come in.
Fair.
And yeah, it's really interesting, and to be able to show people what I do there. And I talk about it a lot, but it's nice for them to actually see it, right?
Well, I can only imagine like people are sitting down. I'm like, oh, so you just like you take straws out of turtles' mouths. Like that's got to be it. Like it's a very, very like high level understanding when everybody's initially starting with that stuff. Where is it airing? Like, because I remember when it, like you told me once, but I want to make sure that I can be able to see it again.
It's on Cottage Life in Canada.
Okay.
So that's the network that you can view it through if you're in Canada. It has not aired yet in the United States. I think they're working on that. And then it just aired in the UK. Nice. I don't remember the name of the network though.
It's easy enough. We're not in the UK. Yeah. Hey, figure it out. Wild Pacific Rescue, find it from there. When you were on, is there like one rescue that they like highlighted when one of the 3 episodes that you would deem like the coolest, the most interesting?
Oh gosh, it's hard to remember everything. I mean, it's nice. So they kind of followed for the seals, just 2 seals that came into the rescue center and their journey from like coming in to release, which was really neat. Because I was there on one of the first days that the seal got there. So you become really familiar with them. And then they did quite a few sea lion disentanglements. And I don't think people really, like you said, understand everything that actually goes into that. Like they have to coordinate the boats, and then you have to anesthetize the animal while you're cutting the plastic off. And it was really interesting to watch. And I've never actually been on one of the sea lion disentanglements. I've seen pictures and heard about it, but it was really cool to actually watch it happen.
Well, and especially if you did that last summer, you had spent so much time at that point, like actually researching a lot of this stuff. Because even when you were like, I'm pretty sure for your undergrad, you did a thesis on transient killer whales. And as we love, for those of you who don't know, seals are the prey of transients, as well as many others, of course.
It's a bit ironic or hypocritical, I guess, that I research transient killer whales and I volunteer at Marine Mammal Rescue. So I save the seals, put them, release them back into the sea, and then transient killer whales primarily prey on the harbor seals.
One might just call you a meal prepper.
That's a bad way to look at it.
That's a real that is rough. I gotta say, every time that anybody says, because I've been watching to Alex in Wonderlust, I only know her as that Alexandra something. She is like a director on Searching for Chinook, but she posted a little series on Instagram recently where they're doing rehabilitation for turtles and other things like that. And whenever I hear like, oh, a seal or a turtle gets checked in to one of these facilities, like all I can imagine is like an animated cartoon of like a seal going up, hi, like can I get an appointment for this? How do they end up finding them and like bringing them in?
Yeah. So a lot of it is just people. It's primarily just people calling in. If they see like because the majority of patients that come in are baby harbor
Mhm.
seals,
Fair.
essentially. So it would be people seeing it on a beach. They'll call it in, and then we just kind of monitor it to make sure that mom's just not out getting breakfast or dinner for the baby.
Nice.
But a lot of the cases that come in at MMR are human interference. So people
Okay.
picking up the seals if they see a baby seal. And then we have to take it into the rescue center because they've then taken it away from mom,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of cases come down to that.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's mainly people just seeing them. Same with like the sea lions, and we have a northern fur seal in right now,
Yeah.
and so it's just people seeing them injured, or if they wander
Fair.
onto their properties on like the island or anything. And
Hey, I don't know. This is like trespassing line is the marine mammal
yeah,
rescue.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
phenomenal. That's when people touch them, because I know with baby chicks or with like baby birds, if you touch them, then the mother like, it's done. Like the connection is no longer there. She doesn't recognize the child. Is that the same with seals?
I don't actually know. That's a
Oh,
really
interesting.
good question. I think the biggest thing that happens is that people think it's a really cute seal. So
Ah,
they'll pick it up and move it. And then if mom goes back to the same spot and she can't find it, um, or she may be scared off if there's a lot of people surrounding the baby and will be resistant to go back to it. Um,
terrifying.
yeah.
That's one thing about like that area too, the Pacific Northwest. For their, this is in like Vancouver, and I'm gonna guess the Pacific Northwest region specifically. But there's like all of the beaches from North Vancouver down. They're highly populated most times. Like there's very few like long stretches of land that I've found that like doesn't have something going on, so to speak.
Yeah, either like people hanging out there or just industrialization. It's a
Yep.
very populated area now for
Yeah.
sure.
No, that's a lot. That's a lot. Well, speaking of the coastline, you actually just went to Tofino.
I did. I went
So,
on the weekend.
woohoo! Was that your first trip like outside of Vancouver during COVID, like since COVID?
It wasn't my first. So
Okay.
I'm originally from Nelson, BC. It's a
All
very
right.
small town in the Kootenays.
Hmm.
So I went home a couple of times
Nice.
when there wasn't a like provincial travel ban on, so like for Christmas and stuff.
Yeah.
But that was my first trip to the island since the summer.
Oh, big moves.
Yeah, it was really nice. Very nice to be back there and get out of the city for sure.
Yeah. Was it like just a proper vacation? Were you guys surfing there?
Yeah, so I went with a few other girls from UBC,
Oh,
and two of
cool.
them had never been to Tofino before.
Nice.
So it was really nice to show them around. Yeah, we just got an Airbnb, hung out
Beauty.
on the beaches. A couple of them went surfing. I mean, Tofino is such a beautiful place to just like walk the beaches, and you can walk forever.
Oh yeah. No, they're long as all. Like when I first showed up, I was surprised at how like open the whole area was, because like it's a very spread out city, number one, but the beaches themselves, well, Long Beach is very well aptly named, but even like the smaller ones as you go up and down, like miles and miles long.
Yeah, and you walk them and you don't realize that you've been walking for like 45 minutes and you're only halfway down, right? And then you're like, "Oh, I guess I should turn around and go back since I've already been gone for an hour at that point."
It looks shorter because you're like, that's one thing, because the trees are so tall, it's like, oh, that's not that far wherever you're on, like whenever you're in Tofino, or even just like some of the coastline, because even when I'm walking Jericho and Kits, like I have a better understanding now just because I've walked it a bunch. But whenever I look at the tree line, I'm like, oh, okay, like this shouldn't be longer than 30 minutes, and it's like a 4 hour walk.
Yeah, especially when the tide is low. When the tide's
Mm.
low and you can go so far out on the beaches in Tofino, you just walk forever.
No, it's insane. That's too good. All right, so bring it back to your research. So you graduated last year with a BSc, I'm pretty sure honors, if I'm right.
So I was in land and food
Oh,
systems.
really?
So yeah, so it
Okay,
is a BSc. It was in applied animal biology.
gotcha.
The honors program is a little bit different there. So it
Hmm.
was with honors,
Ah, I see.
but um, you don't have to be in honors to do a thesis
Gotcha.
in LFS compared to other faculties.
Nice. How did you end up? One, what was your thesis on? And two, how did you end up getting there?
Yeah, so my thesis was on transient killer whales, so the same as what my master's is on. I wanted to look at the abundance and distribution of transient killer whales. So transient killer whales are kind of the lesser known killer whale in BC, I would say. There's a lot of talk about the residents, and more people are starting now to talk about the transients, or Biggs killer whales, they're also known as.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to look at in the inside waters of Vancouver Island. So rather than the outer coast, so that's Salish Sea, Strait of Georgia, and all the way to the northern point of the Vancouver Island, where are transient killer whales actually hanging out? How much of their population is spending time in this area?
Mm-hmm.
And are they present in this area year round?
Fair.
So that's what I was looking at for my undergrad thesis. And it was just, I was only looking at 2017 and 2018 data
Gotcha.
for that one. So it was a shorter period.
Fair.
Yeah. And how I kind of got involved in it, I took a class at UBC in would have been my third year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was research methods and applied biology. So the whole point of the class was to be mentored by a researcher. And you kind of took on a small piece of their research project just to learn what actually goes into the scientific process.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky, and I ended up working with Dr. May Sato.
Okay.
And she was with UBC Marine Mammal Research Unit at the time. She was a research associate for them.
Yeah.
And so she was looking at abundance and distribution of different fish species in the Salish Sea. So I helped her on that, and she's who kind of introduced me to Andrew Trites, my now supervisor,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how it all kind of started.
That's crazy. I remember seeing May because they came out with a video a little while back, and I remember her with the like Sam or the fish research in particular when she started out with that. How did you end up getting in contact with her?
It was just honestly a lot of luck. So you're
Okay.
responsible in the class to find your own researcher to work with.
Yeah.
Some will come in, and if they need help with their project, they'll give a presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I was put in contact with May from somebody actually at Marine Mammal Rescue,
Oh, nice.
who was also a former UBC graduate. So she put me in contact with May Sato. And then while I was waiting to hear back from May, I kind of just cold called them. So I took my CV and I went into the AERL building at UBC and went
Mm-hmm.
to Andrew Trites' office and just said that like I needed a research mentor for a class, and if he had anybody or knew of anybody, and that's ended up working out for me, thankfully.
That's fantastic. No, definitely. And that's one of the things too. It's like, but one of the things I found with UBC at the very least is that if you put in the like 3 steps, usually luck will end up finding you along the way.
Yeah. And like I've this past year I've TA'd for some classes, and
Mm-hmm.
like what I tell all of like the students that I've had is it really comes down to like building those connections with people. So you have to put yourself out there, build those connections, and like that's how I ended up in the position that I'm in right now, just through the people that I met.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my biggest recommendation to all of them who always ask me.
How do you get there? How do you become Taryn?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I love it. How did you get into, so if you went into applied biology and LFS, like I'm going to go even further back now. How did you start on that process? Because it seems like it's a long time.
It is. So I actually have a very long road to get to UBC. So I actually graduated high school in 2012.
Okay.
So I graduated in 2012 and I wanted to be a musician. So so I wanted to go to school for music.
Okay.
But then the summer before college and university was supposed to start, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. Okay. So I ended up going to business school instead.
Yeah.
Very similar, right?
so close, right?
Yeah.
Not a question.
So I went to business school for a couple of years, and it kind of got to a point in business school where I had to pick what major I wanted to do, whether it be like accounting, management, marketing. And that's kind of a point where I took a step back and realized that there wasn't one thing that was drawing me to it. Like I wasn't passionate about marketing or
Yeah.
finances or
It's like the
anything.
idea of business was cool.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was I thought it was like a good general thing to just know in life.
Yeah.
And I thought I could figure it out along the way. But at that point, I realized maybe this isn't the best fit for me right now.
Makes
So
sense.
so I took a year off. I went traveling and worked with a few friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided, and it was kind of one of those things that everyone else knew, but I never clued into,
Yeah.
that I wanted to work with animals. So I decided I
Okay.
wanted to work with animals after my year off.
Mm-hmm.
I'd worked for many different animal organizations since like grade 11.
Yeah.
And I'd always had this big love for animals.
Okay.
So that's when I found the UBC Animal Welfare Program,
All right.
just by like Googling
Yeah.
and looking stuff up. And I decided that I wanted to go there. But I still, at that point, this would have been 2014, I made this decision, I think.
Yeah.
2014, 2015. But when I was in high school, since I was in music and was planning to be a musician, I hadn't taken any of my science courses.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah. So I had to go back and upgrade. So I had to do like all of my chemistry,
Yeah.
physics, biology, everything. And then I finally applied to UBC and started in UBC in 2016.
Okay. That's a wild story. Like
It's a
that's a long what all right, so what music or what was it in music that you were looking to study? Was it a singular instrument or was it something a little bit broader?
Yeah, so I was a drummer actually. Very
Nice.
shocking.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Looking at me, you would not guess that I was used to play the drums.
Oh, that's fantastic though.
Yeah, so they were a ton of fun and I wanted to go into like pursue music as a career. So be a musician, either a
Yeah.
music teacher. Musical therapy was a big thing at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up playing for a big orchestra in Canada. And that's when I decided that I don't think it was really the fit for me. It was super competitive.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, because I mean, you think musicians, like jobs for musicians, there aren't that many.
No, well, also too, like for those kinds of stuff, I can only imagine like there's only so many, and there's like a ton of people that are trying to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, and I was from a really small town and I didn't really get the full grasp of everything until I went and played in this orchestra and then at that point decided it wasn't for me. It was more of just a side passion kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I'm impressed genuinely that you were able to pursue it far enough that you got to the like I would call it so to speak end because in my head once you're in an orchestra you can kind of like you I can grow my network now and have it set up. But you like that's amazing that you got there and were like, okay, no, we're gonna reassess. I give you a lot of props for that because not a lot of people can make it to that degree of something and then decide to switch.
Yeah, and it was tough because I'd applied to all these music schools and gotten in, and that was kind of my plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm sure my parents loved me when in June I was like, yeah, I don't want to go anymore. I want to do something else. So it was tough because all of the like applications to universities had closed at that point. It was
Yeah.
starting in 2 months, and I
Mm-hmm.
decided that I didn't want to go. So I just went to a community college near my hometown and worked my way up from there.
Fair. All right. So you also mentioned the UBC Animal Welfare Program earlier. Is that an academic program, or is it like is it like the Marine Mammal Research Unit, where it's a section of UBC research or something to that degree?
Yeah, so it's within Land and Food System. It's the
Okay.
graduate program there.
Ah, all
So
right.
yeah, so you can go and do a graduate degree at UBC in animal welfare.
Okay, gotcha. That's that's fantastic. One of the things that I've like over my couple years, because initially I thought I was going to go into some semblance of research and then found geography and gone from there. But watching what I want to do change over time has been something that's always been interesting because I've seen some people go straight through. But even looking at the animal welfare program, was there a point where you switched? Because the Marine Mammal Research Unit is not the same explicitly from that.
Yeah, yeah. So like I said, I used to work for a bunch of animal organizations like the
Yeah.
BCSPCA, and that's kind of I was very passionate about animal welfare.
Yeah.
And so I went into UBC thinking that that's what I wanted to go into as my field. I'd always had this love of marine mammals,
Hmm.
even though I grew up on a lake.
Nice.
No marine mammals.
No, not quite that far.
But I would like come to the Vancouver Aquarium when I
Yeah.
visited family here. And I'd always had this love for marine mammals. But as I went through UBC, I was kind of told that it's really hard to get into marine mammal
Yeah.
research and anything really. So I kind of had put it on the back burner and was looking at other options.
Mhm.
And I honestly didn't ever really know what my end dream job was really going
More
through
than fair.
UBC. I just knew it wanted to revolve around animal welfare, animals of some kind.
Yeah.
And hopefully research is what I learned in like third and fourth year when I got to take those research-based classes.
Yeah. Well, then I'm
Yeah.
giving you like all of the applause in the world right now because you're sitting exactly where you should be then.
Yeah, I'm honestly, I feel like I'm the luckiest person to be here, and it's just being in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people. I
Also
got
putting in the
so
right
many
work.
opportunities.
No, without a
Yeah.
doubt. Well, because like there's only, I know I took a bunch of science courses coming up, but it was chemistry in my first year of university that um, kind of took me off the path of science in particular. And to go back and like finish high school courses in order to get into the science department, it also shows the drive that you'll have to get to a place where you want to be.
Yeah,
Like,
and it was
sincerely.
tough because at that point I would have been like 21, I think. So I was 21 taking high school courses,
Yeah.
which was
A lot.
yeah, fun. That's a good word for it. And then when I started at UBC, I was 22. So whereas most
Okay.
people are starting when they're like 17, 18,
Yeah.
I was already 22 at the time. So
When
yeah.
you came in, did you go into first year housing or did you immediately try to go somewhere else?
No, so
Okay.
I felt like I was a little too old to go and live in the residences there.
Fair.
I actually had family. I have a lot of family that lives in
Nice.
Vancouver, so I was lucky enough to live with an aunt throughout 3 years of my undergrad, which
Oh,
was
wow.
very lucky in Vancouver,
Shout out
especially.
auntie.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's phenomenal. No, I that's more than fair. Where did you end up doing? Did you go back to whatever high school to finish the courses, or was there somewhere else that you did them?
No, yeah. So you can upgrade any high school courses at like colleges.
Oh,
So
okay.
I was living in Kelowna at the time.
Nice.
So I just did my high school sciences usually at night
Okay.
classes at Okanagan College in Kelowna.
Gotcha. Also, Kelowna is beautiful. It's my
It is.
first stop. My buddy and I, we went up not last, 2 years ago, May. Because one of his friends worked at, Mission Hill Winery.
Yeah, yeah.
So she worked at Mission Hill Winery, and we've been itching to get back up there since. So as soon as I land, because right now, for those of you who don't know, I think it's it's June 25th when we're recording this. I'm gonna get back like early July, and then I think that weekend or the weekend after that, we're going up because oh my god, I need to see the interior again.
Kelowna's a great summer place. It's right on the lake. You can just go boating. There's so many wineries. Yeah.
Masterful.
Great place to be in the summer.
Yeah. Okay, so you were working with May as your research mentor in the third year class with fish research, so to speak, because that was what she was doing. So you're helping her out with that. How do you make the jump from there to transients?
Yeah. So when I met May, I did the research with her for a semester for the class, and then I was extremely lucky, and she asked me if I wanted to work as a research assistant on her research trip in the summer. So that was a month-long trip on a boat, looking at the northern resident killer whales and the southern resident killer whales, and looking at prey availability for both. So in that case, the northern residents, their population, there's more than 300 of them. They're thriving, they're doing great. Whereas, as many people know, I'm sure, with the southern residents, they're not doing as well. Only about, I think it was 75. There may be a couple new calves.
Last time I checked.
Individuals in that population. So that research project really aimed to see what is the issue. Is it actually fish? A lot of people speculated that it was, but we wanted to actually collect the data, take a look, and see if that was actually the issue. That was kind of maybe the difference between these two populations. and then also see how the both populations of whales behaved.
Okay.
Yeah,
And you
so
were working closely with May on that trip specifically then?
Yeah, so she asked me if I wanted to be a research assistant for her on that trip, and she
Okay.
was responsible for the hydroacoustics. So, really, what that means is we had this big pole that would go into the water and it sends these signals down, emits like a sound, and it'll record and show us on a screen everything that's below that pole. So it's kind of like taking a window and seeing what's directly below the boat. So we could see how many fish, what size the fish were. Like if you've ever been in a boat, just recreationally boating, it's like a fish finder, fish sounder. You can usually see the bottom of the lake or ocean or whichever. But this one's just very highly tuned that it can actually pick up everything between the boat and the ocean floor.
That's phenomenal. No, that's super special. With that, so actually I have a bunch of questions about this trip in particular because it fascinates me. Also too, have you ever seen Free Willy 3?
I was trying to remember this last night, actually. I don't think I've seen Free Willy 3 because, fun fact, the boat that we were on is called the Geek Me. So I went on this trip for 2 years, this past summer in 2020 and in 2019.
Yeah.
And the boat that we were on, the Geek Me, is where they filmed Free Willy.
I knew it.
Yeah, so they filmed the wild whale shots of Free Willy on this boat. And it was actually the first whale watching boat ever in BC.
That one must have been up in Telegraph Cove then?
It was. So it belonged to Jim Borrowman.
Oh my. The history in here is real. People, wow. This is phenomenal. Because I can remember when I think it was posted on the Marine Mammal Research Unit's like Instagram page, like I recognized the boat. I was like, it looks extremely familiar. I didn't realize that it was Jim Borrowman's from all the way in Telegraph Cove though.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, so Jim Borrowman used to own it with Bill McKay, who now does whale watching out of Port McNeill. And it was the first whale watching boat in BC. And then a few years ago, Jim sold it to its now owner.
I love it. That's fun. That's so cool. No, that's I'm getting excited just thinking about that. No, but so the reason that I brought up Free Willy 3 specifically is because too, they leave out of the port of Vancouver in the movie for their research trip.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, when they went, it was so cool because I was watching it like pseudo recently because I did like a watch party with some of my followers, and they like pan when he's like when Jesse's running down the dock and he's bringing pizza, whatever, and you can see the Granville Island or the Granville Bridge, and like the city on either side. So I'm like, I know where that is now. I haven't seen it in that long.
That's really cool. I don't think I must not have ever seen Free Willy 3 because I don't remember that, but it's definitely on my must-watch list now. I want to see that.
No, for sure. Okay, so you were on there on that research or that trip with May, and especially the one afterwards as well. Who else is on that boat?
Yeah, so the first year, if I remember correctly, I think there were 9 of us on this boat. And so it's very close quarters. You share a bed with someone. There's only one bathroom for all of us.
So fun.
Very fun. So I think there was 9 of us. We all kind of had different jobs. So we had the big boat, and then we had a smaller boat that we would tow with us that would then go out to the whales.
Okay. So I can remember was anybody from the BC Cetacean Sightings Network with you? Or was it just the Marine Mammal Research Unit?
Not necessarily just Marine Mammal Research Unit. There were 4 of us from Marine Mammal Research Unit. So myself, May, Dr. Sarah Fortune, she was the one who was kind of leading the killer whale behavioral part of the study.
Okay.
And then Andrew Trites, who was the project head. There was the captain of the boat and his deckhand, who was also on the boat. And then we also had the driver for the other small boat.
Yeah.
And then we had a drone flyer who was provided from Hakai Institute.
Okay.
And we had one other person who was also going out to see the whales.
Interesting.
And I think that's everyone. And I think that's 9 people. But
I think that's 9 people. I'm trying to count over here to try to see, but I would imagine so. No, that's phenomenal. Also, too, the drone shots. I think that's like one of like 3 trips maybe that I've seen that go out and actually do, or not only do, but are allowed to do drone footage, mind you, of the
yes, yeah.
orcas whenever they're going.
There's a lot of permitting that has to be done to fly around whales. And then you
Yeah,
also have to be in a lot of correspondence with the surrounding airports too, right?
for sure.
So yeah, lots of beautiful drone shots. And one of my jobs that I learned partway through the first trip, and then my full job for the second trip was actually catching the drone.
Oh,
So when you like fly your drone from land,
yeah.
you just usually press a button that's like come home and it'll fly itself back. But when you're on a boat and you're moving, if you press come home, that's going to be way behind where you actually are now.
Yeah.
So instead, the drone flyer has to fly it directly into your hands and then you grab it.
That's insane. How easy / hard, like how many times did it get to like really like, oh no, I can do this no problem, do you think?
It's a sketchy job sometimes.
Well, also the propeller's got to be huge.
They're huge, and like it has to be flying until you're holding it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you also have to think a boat is not a stable place to stand.
No.
We're going to be in a lot of swell, and
especially in like the Puget Sound area.
Yeah, Puget Sound, and I mean, both years we ended up going really far up North Island into the open ocean. The swell can be huge up there, and so you're like trying to balance yourself to be able to catch this drone. I have to wear like a helmet and all the safety precautions, so it
Definitely
makes it a bit harder to see.
Just a tad.
Yeah, and then you just hold your arms out, and then you can usually tell when it's at a safe place to reach out and grab.
Gotcha.
And I wouldn't say there's like a point where I was like, oh, I'm good now, because it really depended on the wind, the swell.
Yeah.
One time the drone came back and it only had one handle to catch. The other one had fallen off.
So great. That one's sounds like a different experience every time, it sounds like, more than
Yeah, you kind of never really knew what you were going to get back, and that's like the drone would usually be up in the air for about 20 minutes.
Okay.
And if anyone's ever been on the water, you know that conditions can change very quickly within 20 minutes. So
not a question.
You may send it up and it could be beautiful and sunny and calm. But then when it's time to bring the drone back, and you can't just abandon the drone, you have to bring it back.
Yeah.
It could be way different.
Damn, that's awesome. It's more than fair. And I like find it hysterical too that they hired a specific drone person from Hakai. Like, oh no, this is your entire job. It's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, he's amazing at it. He really is. And like some of the footage that he got is just, it's like breathtaking to be able to see the whales from above. And yeah, it's a very difficult skill to master. It takes a lot of training.
Yeah, like you said, with the variability and as well. What's his name, by the way?
So his name's Keith Holmes.
Keith Holmes. Okay. No, he wasn't who I was thinking then. Interesting.
Yeah, so shout out to Keith for his great drone flying.
Keith, you're killing the game, man. Don't stop. Don't ever stop. You guys also got underwater shots, if I'm right.
We did.
Was that like somebody on the boat? What was that like? You have to hire somebody to do that specifically? Is there like an underwater whale guy?
Kind of. So how we got the underwater shots is there would be a large tag-like sort with suction cups. So it would be put on the whale. And then that's what would record the video. So it's a super quick process where you just go up with the whales. It's a 25-foot pole, so you're still quite far away from them.
Definitely.
We had really experienced boat driver who drove the boat. He's been a whale watcher. He knows how to drive around whales and everything. And obviously we had all of the permitting that was necessary. And so yeah, the whales, you would just wait for them to come up to take a breath, pop the tag on, and they would just continue in stride. It's kind of like the equivalent, like if you got like poked at a grocery store randomly, where you may be like, what was that? But then keep on going. No behavioral changes, which was great.
And you can tell, like from above, you could tell all of that.
Exactly. And that's what we were watching for, especially the first year, just to make sure that this was not doing any negative to the whale.
Definitely.
And especially like as someone who I really value animal welfare, that was my background. It's like I feel fully confident in it. And then the tags would just come off themselves. So we didn't have to like go in again. It was just a one and done.
Perfect.
Yeah, and they're about the size of like a shoe or like a novel kind of. So they're pretty large in size, and that's where the camera was. So
Gotcha.
the camera would be attached to the side of the whale, so you kind of got to see underwater from the whale's point of view.
That's fantastic. For YouTube, I'll definitely post a link to, I'm pretty sure you guys put it on YouTube as well and a couple other places. So I'll link to that. And then I think I might try to like tag you guys on Instagram to send people that way. Because those are also amazing shots.
Yeah, so I think there's 2 of the underwater videos. Actually, no, I think there's more than 2. There was one with a bunch of dolphins swimming around the whales, which was really cool to see, just to see how the dolphins actually interact with them. And something really interesting, like as a researcher looking at that, transient killer whales eat other marine mammals.
Yes.
Including dolphins. So how do the dolphins know that this is a resident killer whale instead of a transient killer whale?
Because they wouldn't be bugging music behind them.
Yeah, exactly. They wouldn't be bugging the transients, let's just say. But yeah, so we saw a lot of dolphin in some of the videos that are posted.
Yeah.
There's one video, one of the things we saw a lot was like a lot of touching between the whales. They're very tactile.
Yeah.
So in one of the videos, there's a mom rubbing her calf's belly as they swim, and it was adorable.
So I bet. For listeners who aren't exactly sure, let's say, what's the difference between a transient and a resident whale? If you had to describe it.
So transients, the biggest difference is their diet. Transient killer whales eat other marine mammals. So commonly harbor seals, stellar sea lions, California sea lions. They will eat porpoise, dolphins, sometimes juvenile like humpback. Yeah, so they eat mammals, whereas the resident killer whales are the fish eating. So those are the ones who will primarily eat Chinook and other fish species. So that's the biggest difference between them diet-wise is the easiest way to kind of explain it.
Yeah.
But then there's also a lot of behavioral differences. So the residents are who you will see grouped up a lot. So if you see the residents, you'll usually see at least 20 of them kind of at one time.
Yeah.
Whereas with the transient killer whales, they don't travel in large groups. There will commonly be 2 to 6 of them.
Yeah.
I think the biggest group ever seen was 40 of them. And that is like a once in a lifetime thing. Whereas with the residents, the residents, that's pretty common to see like a super pod.
For sure.
So yeah, and then you can see physical differences between them. The transients are usually a lot more scarred up on their bodies. They'll have nicks in their dorsal fins just because they eat marine mammals. It's a bigger fight to eat that than a fish.
Yeah.
And then their saddle patches, so the white patch that's just below their big dorsal fin on their back, it can look a bit different between the 2 species.
Yeah, no, that's massive. I remember when I first started getting into it, they were like whenever you hear killer whales being like, oh my God, they're hunters, they're insane. They have all these techniques in order to really like mess with all of their prey. That's where I usually point people towards the transients more than anything else. It's like, it's not all of the killer whales, but there are sections.
Yeah, exactly. There's like a lot of historical writing about killer whales, like devouring animals and just the like really violently depicted scenes kind of. And those would be the transients, not the residents.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So once you go on the trip over the summer, you get back in and you start your 4th year. And that's when you begin your thesis. When you were developing your thesis, how did you end up choosing transients specifically?
Yeah. So when I was on the boat in the summer, we were on the boat for a month. I got to talk a lot with Andrew Trites, who is my now supervisor, and he was the supervisor for my undergrad thesis. So I actually was hoping to my thought was to do something on sea lions.
Okay.
So I wanted to do research on sea lions of some sort. I didn't really know what exactly. But but that was my thought. So I went to him when we were on the boat and I was telling him that I wanted to do an undergrad thesis and I was thinking of doing it on sea lions.
Okay.
And if anyone knows of Andrew, Andrew is a sea lion specialist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so he was like, well, there's a lot done on sea lions. How about transient killer whales? And it's like, okay, sure. So kind of why the research came about was in the Salish Sea, so in British Columbia, and is also attaches to the state of Washington. There has been a push in the last couple of years to renew a seal and sea lion cull in BC waters. And that's just kind of based on the belief that they may be consuming too much Chinook salmon, and that there's too many of them now at this point.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what brought about this renewed call for a cull. So what I wanted to do was look at the full picture. Like, okay, before we do that, we need to look at everything that's going to interact with these species and that may be affected if this were to happen. So the transients primarily prey on seals and sea lions when they're in this area, especially.
Yeah.
So I wanted to look at, like I said, how often are they actually spending time here? Is it a really popular area for them to visit? Therefore, are they really dependent on these seal and sea lion populations for food?
Definitely.
And maybe are they actually even acting already as a natural control for the populations? If there's more and more transient killer whales coming to this area every year, they may be keeping those seal and sea lion numbers low.
Yeah. Rather than having people go out and kill the seals themselves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've seen so many examples in science and ecology of trophic cascades and bad things that happen when you remove a species. So it's just, I think it's important to understand the whole picture before making any decisions. And I mean, that's like above them, so with the transients, and also below them. How is it going to affect the species below? Will it actually make a difference in Chinook salmon if these species are removed? And there's a lot of researchers right now looking at every different piece of the puzzle.
Well, there's different, especially too, once you start looking in the other ways. I'm pretty sure there was a bunch of fish farms that were just either taken down or not allowed to continue along the coast somehow. I thought Alexandra Morton's been posting something about that. But otherwise, because even the Chinook salmon, as much as the seals are eating them, that's also like, oh, they're depleting the populations. It's funny because there's a 1,000 different ways that the Chinook salmon are actually being controlled, so to speak, within the waters.
Yeah, and there's a lot of predators of Chinook salmon, right? So another person from my lab, Zach Shirker, he looked at salmon predators. So he was planning to look at seal haulouts to scan for, they put these little tags in juvenile salmon to then trace where they end up. So who ends up eating them, essentially. So he was planning to look at seal haulouts, didn't find anything, ended up finding a lot of tags at a great blue heron colony. So it just shows that like heron are a huge consumer for salmon, although it's probably a lot less than seals and sea lions. They're also kind of playing a part in this. And I'm sure there's so many other species that also are playing a part in it.
Not a question. Well, also too, this is why you do the research, because from the story he tells, and I can also, I've seen a couple of his talks on it that are absolutely hysterical. They didn't expect blue herons, or like nobody expected blue herons to be a potential predator of salmon, especially too at that line of the growth, because they eat the juvenile salmon, so you don't actually see them feeding once they enter the like larger water stream, so to speak.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's really interesting to kind of follow the full journey to see what's actually happening. And then, so that's kind of part of the research is looking at transients, distribution, and abundance.
Yeah.
And then for my master's, I'm also looking at transient killer whales, technically called their bioenergetics. So really, how much do they have to eat each day? How many seals and sea lions to sustain themselves?
Yeah.
And then I can kind of calculate how much of the population are they actually eating and controlling. And like if we removed seal and sea lion populations or reduce them by 50%, are the transients going to wipe out the other half of the population, like
Mm-hmm.
what's going to kind of happen there, just to see the full picture.
No, that's fantastic. And also too, like it's going to be incredibly important as soon as it's brought up again, which as much as anybody who hopes that it doesn't, we can make more informed decisions once anybody's like, oh no, we could do this again with regard to the call.
Yeah, it's and it was historically done in BC waters, right? So back in like the early 1960s,
Mm-hmm.
1970s, I believe, like culling and hunting seals and sea lions was, you could free at
Do
will,
anything.
like yeah, you could do anything
Yeah, I was
back
gonna
then
say 60s and
essentially.
70s, the wild west of this whole area. I gotta say it's one of my favorite times to read about, but especially too, like the thing I always go back to is Moby Doll.
Yeah.
Because when Moby Doll was like when Moby Doll is the one of the first whales captured within the Pacific Northwest, but it was accidental because it was shot he rather was shot with a harpoon to try to get measurements for a sculpture. But as soon as once the harpoon was shot and Moby Doll was caught, like there were islanders that came down from Saturna Island and like with their own guns shooting at him. Like as soon as I read that, I was like, this is a different world that I'm thinking of, but it's only
Yeah.
like 60 years.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, but it was just different back then, and different views on animals,
Mm-hmm.
both marine and like terrestrial, so
For
Earth.
sure.
But yeah, so from in the 1970s, like seal and sea lion populations were reduced drastically.
Yeah.
And the thought is kind of now they've recovered. They've reached a level at which the Salish Sea can support them.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll be interesting to see. And I mean, it may go either way. I have no idea. That's the point of doing the research.
Things are changing by the day.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just trying to see the transient situation
Yeah.
and what they're up to.
When you finished last year, also COVID graduates, shout out all of you, all of
Yeah,
us.
we feel you.
When you were applying to grad school for that, was it specifically with this project and this group in mind?
Yeah. So again, I got very lucky. I graduated 2020
Mm-hmm.
during COVID. Like you heard, I'd done school for a really long time.
Oh yeah.
And I was kind of at that point unsure of what I wanted to do in the future. Did I want to continue with school, even though I've done it for so long? Do I want to just work? But then with COVID, nobody was hiring. So many
Yes.
companies had laid people off,
Of course.
that I started to talk to Andrew about doing a master's potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he offered me to just continue it. So I'm now doing similar to what I did in my undergrad, but I'm adding a lot more years to the data set, and then also adding that consumption of seals and sea lions.
Fantastic. Is there a time that you want to finish your master's in, or the master's is delineated in, or is it until you finish?
It is, well, I guess technically it's until you finish. You have funding for 2 years.
Okay.
So I am a funded master's student,
Nice.
which is lucky. Yeah. So I have full funding for 2 years.
Yep.
I'm now coming up to 1 year in September.
Yep.
So
Gotcha.
pressure is kind of on to finish all of the research for everything by next winter kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And then you spend months and months writing your thesis, which is
So
many
fun.
pages long.
Oh, without a doubt. Are you going on because you did the trip up with the crew the past 2 years? Are you doing it again this summer?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So that trip was funded, I believe, for 2 years.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, so they had enough funding for 2 years. They did the 2 years. They're starting to publish papers from what they saw from it.
Fantastic.
But I don't think anything will be happening again this year. And it's hard with COVID. A lot of people's like field research has just been cut down or postponed, and yeah, it's tough. I'm really lucky that I don't have field research. I'm using previously collected data.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel for everyone who has their research has been postponed or their degrees have been postponed and pushed just because of COVID.
Well, everything's like it's another 18 steps to get anywhere, whether or not it's trying to figure out how to reschedule, and then you don't know what the regulations are going to do. We were even talking earlier. It's like I'm trying to go back to Vancouver, and it's taken me 3 months or 3 weeks to figure out like what the actual deal is with the country, because they change it every 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, last year when we went on the boat, it was in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
So we just got really lucky in that we had to get a ton of approval from everyone, like
Yeah.
UBC, government, everything. And we got really lucky that COVID cases were a bit lower in the summer in BC last year.
Yeah.
And so we had to quarantine for 2 weeks. Everyone on the boat quarantined for 2 weeks before going on the boat. And
Easy.
then we were not allowed off the boat once we were on.
That makes sense. When you guys were on the boat, you were on the boat for a month fully both times.
Yeah. So the first year it was nice because you could get off and walk around different places.
Okay.
Yeah, we were allowed to go do some sightseeing while we were at different places. But last year, due to COVID, we were on the boat for a month straight.
What was the hardest part about being on the boat for that month? Because 9 people in one space. Even I was with 3 for the majority of this year, but on the water is something different.
Well, if you think about boats, most boats don't have laundry machines.
Oh,
yeah.
Fun.
So there was a very, very small washing machine and dryer on the boat.
Okay.
You could do like a few pairs of socks and a t-shirt at a time.
Yep.
But most of us, like, you would go 2 weeks without doing laundry. So we were a great smelling group.
Oh, I bet. That's how. Well, also too, this is what you're talking like. It's luck or anything like that. As soon as you spend a month on a boat with somebody like Andrew, you get to know him pretty well.
Yeah.
you get to mess around. You're like, you can't talk about research for a month straight, and then more than that too. It's like, okay, like, dude, you've been here for too long. Whatever. It's like I can only imagine all of the.
Yeah, no, you form a lot of relationships, and I mean, you get really close with those people because they're the only people you have, like, you're spending time with for a month straight. And a lot of places we go, we don't even have self-service, right?
I was gonna say no chance.
Yeah, so you're just talking to these people. We played a ton of games, lots of board games and stuff, and then you get to form really strong relationships. And like, I'm really lucky again. I keep saying this, but I just feel so lucky. Like my now supervisor, Andrew. Yeah, I have such a great relationship with him that I think a lot of students and their supervisors probably don't have. Just kind of on another personal level after spending a month for the past 2 years each summer together.
No, that's phenomenal. And like that, the humbleness that you bring to it, it makes everything that you're doing even better. I gotta say, it means that you're doing it for the right reasons, but 2, it's like, with that support, I can only imagine the research that you do becomes better because it's like, it's uninhibited. Whenever you ask questions or do otherwise, it's like, oh, I'm not getting this, or like, can you help me out with X, Y, or Z? It's like, I can see the support being even more so there than it would be otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel so supported by everyone in my lab at UBC. I think we have a really great cohesion between everyone. But it's important to be able to feel comfortable to ask those questions, especially as like a woman in science, which is something that's being talked about a lot more now.
Definitely.
There's fewer of us. So yeah, it's nice.
No, women in STEM, we're all here for it. Oh, I had one more. Okay, so the board, I just want to go back to real quick. The board games, was there like, because you did this for 2 years, was there a game when everybody came back that you guys were all excited to play?
I don't know if everyone was excited. I was really excited for one of them because I did really well in it the year before. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. Oh, Love Letters. That's what it's called.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever played. Yeah, I highly recommend Love Letters to anyone listening. It's really fun. I got really good at it first year. And then I was like, we got on the boat second year and I was like, anyone want to play Love Letters?
Up and ready. What's the point of the game?
So there's different cards. So there's different cards and there's different royalty like people, I guess, on each card. So the goal of the game is to end up with the princess card.
Interesting.
But then each card has like a different feature of what it can do. So like the king, you can look at someone else's card, or like the prince, you like stop someone's turn or something like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So goal of the game is to end up with the princess, but it was really fun. And then we also played a lot of, I don't know if you've ever played, I think it's called Code Names.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that was a fun one, but it was my first time playing with a group of scientists.
Ah.
And so it's just like another level of intelligence where I'm like, I don't even know what this means. Like,
You had to be, now that I think about it, you had to be one of the youngest people on the boat as well by like a good deal, if I had to guess.
yeah, the first year I was the youngest person, probably by like 10 years. Second year, May Sato could not join us on the trip,
Hmm.
so someone replaced her,
Gotcha.
and she was similar to my age.
Gotcha.
So
In the first year, how was it intimidating to walk on? Had you, especially, I know you were familiar with Masato at the time, but with everybody else, that's kind of it's a pretty heavy crew to kind of like step on board with, so to speak.
yeah, I was very nervous, and I kind of accepted my role as like the bottom of the totem pole, and like I
Definitely.
would do whatever anyone needed me to do. And but I mean, it didn't end up being like that.
Hmm.
Obviously, like everyone's super respectful,
Of
and
course.
it was great. But no, it was really intimidating, and like I'd never spent any time with Andrew at
Okay.
that point, or these other big, huge researchers.
You guys met before you got onto the boat? Like
Uh,
the everybody that was going to be on there for the month.
no.
So so you like you walk onto the boat, you're like, hi, we're going to be spending a month together as of right now.
Yeah, you're like, hi, I'm Taryn. By the way, we're sharing a bed.
Oh, so fun.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Um,
special. They don't tell you
yeah,
about that
no,
during research.
I had met three people
Okay.
prior to getting on the boat.
Yeah, a nice
And that
third.
was it. Yeah.
A nice third of the people.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone else was new to me, but then the second year it was mostly the same people returning, a couple
Yeah.
of new people. But I definitely felt way more comfortable at that point.
Oh, I bet. I bet. That's one of the things I really like about this community as well, is that anytime I've walked in, even I know I've talked with Andrew a couple of times, it's like as intimidating as anyone might be from afar, as soon as you actually get to talking with them, everybody's like nice and looking to help as far as I'm concerned, or looking like they're not as intimidating as they seem.
Yeah, and everyone loves to talk about research, everything happening, and just
Hmm.
like killer whales in general.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
it's nice.
No, that's phenomenal. No, that's more than fair. That's one of the things too. I remember I was talking with Ingrid Visser a long time ago, who's orca researcher down in New Zealand. And she was saying too, it's like for people to come on exactly like you were talking about, like one of the things that I don't think a lot of people think about when they're entering into some of this stuff is that as much as you didn't have to be the bottom of the totem pole, like having that in mind as the first thought, it's like, no, I'm here to work. I'm here to do what needs to be done in order. Like I'm here to do a job, so to speak. Um, it's not really seen for a lot of people. It's like, oh no, I'm gonna go like whale watching the whole time. It's like that's not what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, I learned so much on both years. Like the first year, I kind of went in just thinking that my job was helping with hydroacoustics. But then I got trained to catch the drone partway through. So that became my job. And I kind of just had like a hand in everything.
Yeah.
And then second year, I kind of moved up the ranks a little bit. And I became one of the photo IDers. So I
Oh
would photo
really?
ID all of the individuals who we came across. And yeah, it was really, really fun.
Well, also, or so if that was the second year that you did that, I can remember when did we first talk? Because it was had to have been it was 2020 when COVID started. So it was like winter of 2019 because that was the Marine Mammal Research conference.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we talked last spring.
Yes.
I was just finishing up, I think, my undergrad thesis.
And we were taught, yeah, because that was with Andrew in the computer science department for whatever it was. Yeah. So that was
Yeah.
that. Um, when you were, I remember the last time we talked though, you were like pouring through data sheets or not data sheets, photos
Yeah.
of transients. So if you were photo IDing on the second trip, was that also with Northern residents?
Northern and Southern. Yeah. So
Okay.
with my undergrad thesis, I had to go through thousands of photos of transients and ID them.
Hmm.
So I got really good at IDing, which was like I guess a good skill to have. I don't know how useful it is in the real world, but
Well, as of
um,
right now, research is the real world as far as like where you're enveloped.
yeah, that's true. So yeah, and then I got to. It was beneficial, obviously, because I put that skill to use on the second year of the cruise.
Hmm.
I just kind of got a knack for being able to ID and what to look for really quickly.
Good stuff.
And so I was, one of the IDers for last year. And then I was kind of just like the jack of all trades. Like if somebody needed something to be done, I would do it.
You've got it set.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say too that all of that's transferable. There's not too many people where you've asked them like, oh, like, can you catch a drone that's created for research? Like, that's not a skill that everybody has in their back pocket. You can't really go to a class for that.
Definitely not. No. And it was a ton of fun and just learning everything. And it's a lot of expensive equipment. So you learn to be very careful. And
Oh, I bet even more so. Your screen probably hasn't cracked in a while. Then even just as soon as you come back, it's like, I can see that expanding into other areas.
Yeah. Just every time I caught the drone, it's like, I don't care what happens to me. Just don't drop the drone. Don't drop the drone.
No, more than fair. So when you were IDing, and this will be like one of the wrap-up questions too, is there any whales that you were so happy to see because they were so easy to ID for the transients?
For like during my master's looking at the photos?
Yes.
Yeah. So the transients, there are a few individuals who are very easy to ID.
Mm-hmm.
So there's Chainsaw. I'm sure if anyone's ever heard of transients, they've probably heard Chainsaw's name.
Definitely.
Very well-known transient killer whale, has huge bites
Dashes?
out of his dorsal fin, essentially. Hence the name Chainsaw. And then there's also a transient killer whale who is white.
Oh, yeah.
So T46 B1B. Don't know his name that has been given to him.
Gotcha.
But yeah, he is kind of like an albino type of killer whale. It's called lucent. But yeah, he is white, and it's my dream in life is to see this killer whale. And we were so close on the boat last year. They were so close to us, but we had to get to our spot where we were anchoring for the night. So
that's too bad.
We missed them. But yeah, there's a lot of transients who are you kind of, after you do it for a few individuals, you get to recognize them really easily. And you'll just be able to go through photos and be like, oh, that's T2C. Oh, that's awesome. T99. Like, yeah.
So I always found this really cool, and I think everybody else or anybody listening would actually really appreciate it. So T46B1B. Now, I know how to read that, and I've done that research myself. But if you had to explain to somebody what T46B1B means in terms of the our ID, could you do that?
Yeah. So as I was saying that, I was like, no one probably knows what this means. So in transients, so each individual has a different number. So T46, for example, that would be one head of the matriline, so a female. Then there's the T46 pod, who all travel together. T46B is another female, so that means that it's T46 is child. So if you have the first, so T46 would be the mom. All the offspring of T46 would be A, B, C, D, E, respectively. Then if those individuals have a child, they get a number attached to them again. So it goes T46B is the offspring of T46. Then T46B's offspring would be T46B1. And then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. And then it just keeps going and going. And I was actually joking with someone the other day. I was like, in like 50 years, we're going to have like T46, B1, BA, 2, C, like just so many, like such long names.
Oh yeah, we're at a point in time where like it's doable enough, but it's going to be obsolete very fast.
Yeah, even like we're getting kind of down in the generations now, like the T46 B1B and B1A, like it's starting to get a bit confusing, and then they're going to have offspring, and it's just, it's going to be fun. I feel bad for those researchers later in life.
Well, you never know. I could see you, Jared Towers, who is another person that's researching transients right now, and a couple other people getting together to try to see if there's another way to identify them, even by name, because that's, at the end of the day, this is one thing that I've been trying to remind myself of, is that a lot of the terms that we'll use are very arbitrary and can be changed. It's just a matter of like having that be an official process.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And there's transients have kind of been on the back burner for the last few years for sure. Not as
Hmm.
much research has been done on them, but there's a lot more happening now, especially looking at different populations of transients. So we call them the transients, our West Coast transients
Yeah.
in BC, but they're now kind of figuring out that there's actually probably a couple different populations within the West Coast transients.
This
So
web of orca talk. I don't know what to call it. Actually, you might have a better term, because when I look at killer whales, what I say is that they have their own taxonomy. Is that like you have genus and species, and then you have ecotype, pod, matriline, and or the ecopod type and matriline, sometimes clan when you look at the northern residents. Um, you think that's the right term? Like, you think there's a better one that we could use?
yeah, there's actually a lot of talk about this in the scientific community, and I don't think they've come up to an agreement yet.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not like different species by any means.
Of course.
And like populations, there's different populations. So like you
Yeah.
have the northern resident and the southern resident population, and
Mm-hmm.
then the ecotype would be the resident. So
Yes, of
it's
course.
yeah, it falls under, but what falls above ecotype, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, that's it's a wild, because even when you're talking about the populations underneath the transients, all I'm seeing is different categories being built out. It's like one big database, as
Yeah,
far as I understand.
and especially there's kind of this historical use of like population, then pod, and then matriline. But with the
Mm,
transients, they don't really travel in matrilines.
okay.
They'll frequently split apart or go into different groups, or
Yeah,
they'll one of them will leave for a week and then come back.
the Lone Rangers of the ocean.
Yeah, so we're kind of starting to introduce this term matra group instead of matriline,
Okay.
where if it's a group that frequently travels together, like there's a lot of groups in the transient population
Yeah.
who are known to travel together, but they're not necessarily related or offspring of
Interesting.
another whale. Yeah, it's just kind of like it's be interesting to see like the relationships they develop within their populations and how those form and how they choose who they want to travel with, essentially.
Well, Andrew was very good then in putting you to this direction, because it sounds like there's a thousand more things to be doing within research with regard to transient, even just social um, groupings
Yeah,
alone.
yeah. I will lie awake at night sometimes or be reading something and like think of different research questions and it's like, oh, that's good. I'm gonna write that down.
Well, and see, and this is another thing too, is like for anybody listening right now, it's like you're the person to be talking to if you're trying to get into this stuff, and like I need to find a question. I have thousands.
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
so many for you. I can only imagine that's likewise for yourself.
Yeah, and so many researchers, like one of the things that I learned spending time with Andrew was
Hmm.
that even if you go to like a graduate supervisor with a question in mind,
Yeah.
as long as you have some type of question, they may not necessarily take that question as your research project, but as long as you show that you can kind of form a type of question, they usually have so many ideas that they're like, I just want you to be able to show me that you can formulate this thought, but then I want you to do, I have this research question that I'd love for you to look at. And I think so many researchers just have hundreds of research questions on the back burner.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. No, that's more than perfect. Well, we're hitting upon, just over an hour right now, so we'll wrap it up for right now. But I am so excited to have you on again, especially too once your research drops, once you finish your master's thesis at the very least next year. So I hope, or so help me, hopefully will this podcast will still be going by that point. But thank you so much for having on. Is there would you want to plug any research that's coming out? I know the programs that you've worked with regard to the school or otherwise. Like, I'll give you a space right now to drop any names and otherwise.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, I'd love to come back and share what I find. Hopefully, it's super cool and interesting. Some of it may be out this fall. The second part will be out in the spring. But yeah, so you can find UBC's Marine Mammal Research Unit. They are on all social media platforms. So they're just starting a TikTok,
Let's
Instagram,
go.
Facebook, Twitter. It's just at UBC Marine Mammal. So that's where you can find them. Some of the underwater videos I think are going to be posted to TikTok, so stay tuned for that. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. Instagram is just at Taryn Scarff, TarynsScarff. And then Twitter is at Taryn_Scarff. But yeah, that's where you can find me. If anyone has any questions about anything that I said today, or just questions about getting into this type of research or grad school in general, like I said, I love talking about it and sharing my experience and kind of how I got here. And I'm more than happy to make those connections for people. So yeah, you can just find my email on my Marine Mammal Research Unit page.
It's perfect. Or drumming.
Or yes, I haven't drummed for a while. I may be a little rusty, but if you would like some very, very basic lessons, I'm sure I can offer you something.
It sounds like we got to get you back in the studio. I know I have one friend who's the drummer in a band. I'm pretty sure that they all moved away from Vancouver, but if they're ever coming back, I'll definitely have to let you know for that too. Maybe a little guest appearance just for fun.
All right, there you go. End my career.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening once again. I'm the Orca Man, and have a good one. Wonderful. Bottom.